Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. Today, we're bringing on some people that have come together to make some controversial films, controversial art of a slightly political nature. And as we all know, we live in 1984. There's also a little bit of Brave New World going on, some Animal Farm. All the hits have been brought together for 2021. And I feel like as a libertarian person that's kind of been awake to what's been going on for a long time, we always wait and we always look for that moment to happen, right? But then when it actually happens, it's like, wow, I can't believe that this is what's going on. So one of the main things that has suspended reality is, of course, COVID-19. And you hear the expression, follow the science, bandied about. Even this morning, I was, fear scrolling, doom scrolling, is that what you call it when you look at really scary news? And yes, there's still compilation videos making fun of how they were saying, follow the science. So I was very intrigued to talk with this group. They're known as the SoundMind Creative Group, and they're comprised of professional filmmakers of all different types. They have a passionate commitment to freedom of expression and uninhibited exchange of ideas, which sounds good to me. Unfortunately, Hollywood, as you guys also know, has become a propaganda arm for all the different governments. Yay! And there isn't really there isn't anything that's really going out with the message. But you do have still some documentaries. I have some friends that have controversial documentaries, though, and they're not allowed to be shown. So that's why we're going to open this up with, why are you guys staying anonymous?
We debated it long and hard, trying to decide how we were going to approach this. And the truth is we all actively work in the entertainment industry. And we've experienced a form of cancel culture for many years there. It's not a new thing in LA and in the entertainment industry in a broader sense. It's quiet, but we've had the experience of slowly losing clients if we are vocal about our political orientations. So we know firsthand the potential consequences, especially with the rise in cancel culture in this past year.
The knock-on effect, too, is, we've seen as part of the evolution in the last 10, 15 years is that, privacy used to be something people valued and had put a premium on, and it really has kind of gone by the wayside. So we feel by going through this experiment of anonymizing the process here and having this collective, because we want to invite other creatives, other film workers, crew, filmmakers, all sorts, to feel comfortable to come work with us. And by us putting the effort in to anonymize us at this level, people will see that we're demonstrating that we can protect their identities if they want to work with us. Express themselves, give them a platform to put their creative efforts where they want to without fear of retribution. So obviously there's a bit of a circle of trust with us being out in the public and publicizing this. But we see that there's, we want to have this sort of coalition of creatives and, where we can really not risk our livelihoods, which is the real problem with cancel culture.
Just to add to that real quick, I think there's a large amount of creative people that have their one foot sort of in the more left-leaning Hollywood world, but have different viewpoints than that narrative. And I think that there seems to be, we've found, and we've had people approach us and stuff, and I think there's a lot of people in that world that want to express themselves but can't, and there's this conflict, and it's been frustrating. I've personally felt that for a number of years. For example, Facebook, becomes sort of a Rolodex in a sense. So I have friends on there, but I also have colleagues and people I work with and see all their posts and all that kind of stuff. And I stopped posting anything even remotely political probably 9 years ago, maybe. And it's just because I just don't, I'd rather they just don't know, but it's frustrating, and it's extremely frustrating. So as a creative, you want to express yourself and express how you feel about certain things. And the fact that you can't is frustrating. So, this has been an interesting experiment. And I think there's going to be a lot of very talented creative people that we can bring on board to help bring this thing to life that otherwise might not. So.
Yeah, I can really appreciate that. I remember recently there's a women's group and they were asking for NFT artists, right? And I mean, I'm literally like the original artist coin. And I submitted my information, but you know that they're not going to let me go on their little lady club thing because they're going to look at my libertarian stuff and they're going to start crying, you know? And it's really, really frustrating. But I've always taken so much inspiration from artists and creators and films and books that have the ability to kind of change people's mind and provoke thought. I mean, Cat Stevens' Peace Train is the perfect song to me because it's a great song, but then you're talking about peace and I've been so disappointed with media that there's no music that expresses that anymore, and films or anything. And honestly, I'm kind of mad at the people in Hollywood, but I can also appreciate that you can't just be blackballed from the industry. How are you guys going to get others in there? I mean, is it a secret club? Are you going to give them like a branding? Like how deep does this go?
Well, we've been working in this space for quite a while, and there is a community of people in Hollywood who identify as heterodox or not following the mainstream. So we've been developing contacts in that arena for quite a while. And also with the media that we've been putting out over the last month or so, we've made it clear that we're looking for people. And I guess we should say right now, our email address is SoundMind Creative Group at protonmail.com. If anybody is hearing this and has skills that they want to bring to the table, we're certainly open to finding new talent to bring onto our team for the project.
Awesome. So how do you guys fund this kind of stuff, right? Like, is this going to be your first project? Because we're going to talk about the film in just a second. Because is that your first project?
Well, we're taking a grassroots approach to start. So, you know, we have a crowdfunding page set up, and that's the fundraiser.com, razr.com /follow the science. And so, I mean, we're doing things like this, you know, appearing on podcasts and that, and trying to get the word out in sort of a grassroots method. And so far, you know, that's been great. Obviously, to reach ultimate goal for the project, which we can get into that a little later, we're going to have to, you know, we're going to be talking to more individual donors, larger donors, and probably exploring grants and some of that as well. But that's been the process so far. We're closing in on $75,000 already, and basically we launched just about a month ago. So. And we're just kind of honing in the message and really starting to get out there. So that feels very promising so far.
Was it hard to pick a platform? Because a lot of these platforms are not allowing controversial anything. You know, they're just deplatforming people even from fundraising.
Yeah, that's been difficult. I think, you know, John might be able to elaborate on that a little more. He was the one that kind of was looking around as we discussed that. But yeah, we thought about that for sure.
Yeah, we chose Fundraiser because it offered us the most flexibility in terms of all the variables. The other major platforms have some hard rules that didn't allow us to kind of be as flexible as we need to be for this. We didn't look a whole lot into like getting deplatformed on this platform. So hopefully we'll be good there. But certainly I think the fact that it's a less visible platform than like Indiegogo or Kickstarter or GoFundMe probably gives us a little bit of protection.
Have you guys taken in any crypto yet? Have you thought about that? That seems to be a popular way of donating. And sometimes, you know, if you take in, for example, Monero, I'm not sure that everybody wants to necessarily be associated on paper with freedom-based projects necessarily, given the current climate.
Yeah, we actually did. We have taken in some crypto, and we've had a lot of people ask about that. So we set up on actually even through that fundraiser, there's a link at the top if you know that we accept various types of cryptocurrency, and they can, as well as by check too, which some people have done, and there's a link to our SoundMindCreativeGroup.com website, the page where there's some information, and there's the QR codes and stuff. So we've got a wallet set up and we're accepting crypto. Of course, yeah, we got to do that.
Well, I hope you guys have some good security management. I think that could be a little bit scary being in charge of that. You should have somebody good helping you, but it can be a big boon. And I feel like, I don't know, price predictions are not my thing. I'm always feeling optimistic, but that I think is a really neat way when people donate crypto, because the recipient can then get the appreciation. Obviously, the market's down now. It doesn't really work out with those plans at the moment. But, if people are donating now, when the market rallies back, that's going to make, I think, a huge improvement. So you've been doing the rounds because you're in pre-production for this film. Tell me a little bit about this film. What can somebody expect besides a science lesson?
Well, so what we're developing, it started off as a documentary idea, but it's evolved into a 5-episode docuseries. And we're
oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so we've realized that we wanted to broaden it a little bit as we develop it, and so we are fluid with the concept. And we realized there was just so much to cover that and docuseries are all the rage these days. But we want to examine, if the scientific data justified the lockdown strategy that was implemented throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. But we also really want to look at the critical aspect of the stories, the emotional stories of people whose lives have been severely disrupted by the lockdowns. Destroyed. These policies really destroyed a lot of lifestyle. The economy is in ruins. There's people who have not received critical medical care, children who have lost precious time in developing their skills, children who are suffering mentally because of the confines. Then on to the adult level, people whose careers and their aspirations and dreams are in ruins, and suicides on the rise, addictions on the rise. All these things that happened. And if we go right back to the data, did the data in fact support the lockdowns? And so maybe just answering your question earlier, we want to explore it in an exploratory way. We don't want to say, hey, we believe this, therefore we're going to have sort of a bias and look for stuff that reaffirm it. I think we think if we go after the scientific minds that are being silenced and give them a platform to speak, we may be able to show to a more general audience that the data perhaps, most likely in our opinion, but we will find out, didn't support these lockdowns, that these lockdowns may in fact even hurt more than helped the pandemic, let alone the economy. So it's that combination of emotional driven stories, the discrete stories of how people experience it, the empathetic sort of journey of our culture running alongside the scientific method that really, which is a series of asking questions. And right now you can't ask those questions. So we want to ask those questions and see if we can break through the narrative a little bit.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the kind of broader themes that we see emerging from this are really examining what does it mean to be practicing science? What does it mean for science to influence public policy? What happens when centralized approaches to big problems are forced upon a population? And that's kind of the overarching theme that we're seeing arising out of this, is that centralization doesn't work, whether it's trying to deal with the pandemic, whether it's trying to get scientific knowledge out there, and even extending to things like public policy and banking, and not that those are kind of outside of the scope of the documentary, but the idea of centralization being a problem in human society is an important overarching theme. Yeah.
Are you able to share any of the experts that you've lined up for this, and how are you going about that? How do you decide who's going to be a good choice? There's so many differing opinions, and they're kind of polarized. Have you thought about who you're going to be bringing in?
Well, we've been talking to a few different people. One who has been a great resource so far, and that we're working with closely to kind of consult and guide us on as far as experts and potential interviewees and all that, has been Nick Hudson at Panda. So he's been a great resource so far. We've talked with a few other people. Of course, we kicked this off. We were on this got kicked off on Tom Woods, so he's been a pretty good resource as well. He's had many guests on his show that he's helping us with that. So we're treading that carefully because we want to make sure we don't want anyone that's going to be too easily painted as sort of a conspiracy theorist or anything that's going to kind of limit our visibility, because in the long run we really want a lot of people to see this, especially left to center types, so that we can start to sway some opinions, that we can kind of tap into their subconscious skepticism about all this, even though they may be shouting one thing. I'm sure that slowly there's been some doubts, especially as the narrative has evolved, for example, with the origin of the virus and all that stuff breaking recently has been interesting. And so yeah, we're being careful about who we'd have featured.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like people are just looking for a way to disprove the other side. It makes me wonder, how are you going to distribute this film? Obviously, Hollywood isn't super into this. Now we have the internet. The internet does seem a little bit tapped down. Have you thought about distribution? And tell me a little bit more, like broadly. That's evolved a little bit, I think, more in recent years. What is the landscape for film releases now? Not film. Sorry, I keep saying film. But for a docuseries, like, are you going to try and bring it to a Netflix? Because I feel like they're not going to be into this. Because they're going to say, no, we love Fauci.
Well, as Matt was just saying, our goal is to make it as kind of mainstreamed as possible, even though it certainly has challenging ideas in it. So, our hope is that by about a year from now, when this will really be complete, that maybe the heat around these ideas will have died down a bit, and we'll be in a space where a platform like Netflix might consider it a worthwhile endeavor. Obviously, we'll see how that pans out. An important piece of our fundraising effort will be to raise enough funds to bring on somebody who really understands the landscape of public relations in the entertainment industry and can help us navigate those waters. So that person or firm will really help us figure out the messaging in order to best get this where it needs to go to get the most eyes on it.
Have you guys heard about the Great Barrington Declaration? Will you be mentioning it in the series? Have you reached out to those guys?
Yeah, we're in the process of connecting with some of the people involved with that. One in particular that's been recommended to us is Jay Bhattacharya, who he's been on quite a few podcasts and is a very good spokesman for the Great Barrington perspective. So we will surely have some representative from that group as part of the documentary.
A lot of people are getting mad about the word hydrochloroquine or ivermectin. I mean, I guess people are even getting banned for using it. Are you going to be tackling some of the treatment options? Are you going to be tackling vaccines? Like, what is it? Are you trying to see the origins of the virus, or is it basically everything?
Well, I mean, we're still in development, but the idea of the docuseries kind of evolved out of the idea that those are things I think we do need to take a look at. So I mean, roughly, again, everything is changing and evolving, but roughly there would be an episode, of course, on lockdowns and mask mandates and that kind of thing, and the policies around that. There'd be another one surrounding vaccines, in which within that we would certainly talk about treatment, since that's kind of tied together. So we'll explore all of that as well as vaccines, and of course vaccine passports and all of what that kind of stuff brings. And then the origin of the virus will likely be another episode, which I think it's also important that we need to explore that and gain of function research and all that, and the implications of that kind of thing, and then we're talking
that's really
about,
unraveled in the past few weeks.
Yeah, it has. So that we've been following that closely. So that's and in fact that's given us a little more encouragement to explore that without it being something too controversial, because it's clearly now even Fauci is saying that he supports an investigation into that. So
Of his own money that he sent, like I mean, he was responsible for it. Wasn't there like $3.7 million sent in 2017 after they were doing the data function research in the North Chapel Hill, I think was the lab, and they made it illegal. I mean, this guy, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I want to tune in and I want to see what you guys discover, because he's like, oh, maybe we should research it. It's like, what are you talking about, buddy?
That's a big part of it. I mean, the narrative that they're in the real time experience that we all went through in this past year, there was a narrative that was put forward at the political level claiming to have scientific backing. And yet that data was really unproven, and the narratives were just, they seem to be making them up on the fly. So part of what we want to do is just go back and look at the information and the data as it was coming out, and sort of reassess what were they saying versus what we were learning at the scientific level. I mean, the actual sort of scientific community, and what were where they sort of tended to emphasize, here's something, there was a lot of bias where anything that reinforced the lockdowns would be reported. Anything that moved away from reinforcing the lockdowns was not reported. Now we can go back and in hindsight, we want to try to look at what were they willfully ignoring. We think the sin of omission is something that we need to really look at in terms of the narratives that were put forth, and what was known, what wasn't known. Why was the idea of it not being coming out of a lab that was right next door to the supposed origin point? Why was that immediately pushed to the side? And if you were to even mention it, you faced the bans from the various deplatforming and whatnot. And yet these are perfectly legitimate questions, as well as questions about viable treatments. Why were we only allowed one specific narrative at that level, and what of all the other variables that could have been brought to bear to help manage this and treat people? And it just seems so singular, and that's part of what we want to investigate.
Another important extension of that is the fact that people so quickly and easily assumed that what those who are, quote, in charge were saying was correct. And I think that's a deep level aspect of this, is getting people to ask the question of themselves, why did I believe what so-and-so was saying about this? Is it because they're in a position of authority? Does that give them some kind of kingly knowledge that they can dispense to the populace? And I think, that this kind of idea of encouraging people to be dissidents, to question what those in power are putting out there is a key underlying element of this. I mean, I'm not sure how directly we'll address it, but undermining the people's confidence in authorities who don't really have the expertise to be talking about this stuff is an important aspect.
Indeed. And they have the platform and repetition, and it was just the repetition of message. It just seemed to allow people to give up on their own agency and ability to critically think and all that. So we really feel it's important to show people a path to think for themselves.
I don't feel like people even want to. I think that they like it.
Good point.
Like, now you're hearing about people who are wearing their masks, making love, like both vaccinated. I mean, I heard about this in the radio and I'm like, what, are you serious? And then the guy's mask's all dirty and like smelly. And I'm like, oh my God, like what have we come to? Do you think, are you guys going to get into Trump at all? Because I mean, and here will be the accusation. You're making this movie, you guys must love Trump. Is that true? Like, do you think that Trump has anything to do with anything? Do you guys care about Trump? Is he your Lord and Savior?
I think Trump is pretty irrelevant to the story, really. I guess it may be important to look at how the opposition to Trump embraced ideas that they might not have otherwise embraced had he not said what he said, on a kind of knowledge level. But I'm not sure how much he plays in this story. And a part of our orientation on this is to try to be as, even though what we're saying has political content, to try to be as apolitical as possible, and also to make it clear that the underlying values of the ideas that we're putting forward are values that those who have a, quote, liberal mindset should embrace. They should be embracing freedom of expression. They should be embracing a true understanding of the scientific method. They should be embracing a concern about all of the people whose lives have been decimated by these policies. And in any normal circumstance, those who call themselves liberal or progressive would be concerned about those things.
Yeah, and there was a distinct weaponization of the empathy. I mean, when you mentioned the previous administration, what and the name Trump that evokes for a lot of people is a type of hatred, and it seemed to be there was sort of a weaponization of the hatred where it was always. I mean, some of it was self-created, but it was also a constant diet of reinforcement of that to create a new form of shame and shunning. Anyone who thought differently, anyone who bought into that, anyone who didn't hate the opposition appropriately was systematically otherized, and then that otherization was merit for the cancel culture, the deplatforming, the shaming, the shunning. I mean, these are all tactics from human history 100 years ago that we all thought we were done with, and now it seems as if everyone's like, as long as someone's pointing at someone to be angry at them, people they'll fall into line and do so without questioning it. And we want to bring that questioning back into it. We feel the liberal mind should be questioning things like that and not just shame and shun just because they've been told it over and over and over by the mainstream media.
Yeah, and I think there's to add to that too, as far as sort of the left of center viewpoints. I mean, another aspect is the removal of agency and liberty of individuals. We're going to explore a little bit how that leads to inequality, in particular with the lockdowns, and we'll touch on themes like that kind of thing as well. That again, those left of center should be sympathetic to those kinds of things. So we don't want to just preach to the choir. We need to do a little more than that, I think, at this point. So it's going to be a balancing act in a sense, and just the tone and everything. That's probably one of the things we've talked most about as we've been developing this. So.
In your opinion, do you think that there will be any accountability? I mean, some would say that these are crimes against humanity. I would probably be one of those people. Do you personally think that there's ever going to be any kind of reconciliation or day of reckoning, Like, is there going to be a judgment on some of these people that kept people from their family? I mean, people talk about Cuomo and his, lady problems. I'm thinking that maybe killing a bunch of people is a bigger problem than hitting on chicks, So, but then he got an award. It's like crazy. Like, who gives this guy an award? Like an actor's award. We're really living in this really, really bizarre land. Do you think that there's going to be a return back? Because I feel like we're almost getting a little bit squished right now, right? The overlords are like, we got to get all the power we can before these people wake up. And people are like, somebody's waking me up. And they're getting mad. Like, what's going to happen? Because they don't really want to push it too far, because then they're all going to go down, right? Like they have to kind of keep it, like they can't just completely say, you're right, we're tyrants. Like they want to kind of keep the grift going.
I think there's a lot of opportunists in the group and in the sort of bureaucratic class that I think you're describing, let alone there's opportunists. There's some not good people in that world, some real jerks. But I think if we can create a bottom up movement where people in general are seeing just the insanity of it all. I mean, any sort of just down to earth, live and let live person can see that the things have just gotten out of hand. And if the culture moves slowly. But if we can, in the next 2 to 6 years, start to get that culture to shift back to where it needs to go, I think that, where we feel that there, as we keep reiterating, we want to say return to agency and a way of thinking for yourself, that the barometer will switch and the bureaucrats and the opportunists will fall into line. In terms of a a day of reckoning, that's a tough call. It's a tough call. Will there ever be such a moment? And I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are curious to see that. A lot of people are in a wait and see kind of aspect. I think it really is a matter of economy. If people really do, if with inflation rising and if the value of the dollar goes down and people really start hurting, I think a recipe for something more drastic is in the offing. But I'd like to think the American spirit and the American people are going to pull back together and heal the divides, and we're hoping to be part of that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think along those lines, I mean, in a way, I tend to think, I guess it's a more economic aspect of libertarian thinking, but the sort of the economy of politics, and if the, if the people shift their view over time, the politicians are going to react to it kind of like a market, because at the end of the day, they need to raise funds and they need to get votes and they need to get reelected or elected and all that kind of stuff. So, well,
these days I'm looking at the elections, I'm thinking like, I don't know, are these, that's a whole other movie.
It's a more optimistic viewpoint, and certainly a slow moving one. But if the majority of the people kind of, wake up and they want a certain thing out of their politicians, we see that a little bit. Some of the most, Gavin Newsom is a little bit of an example of that. I mean, he's been awful, of course, but in some ways he'll backpedal here and there, with the whole recall and stuff. I mean, it's like, oh, the threat's coming, so then it's like, okay, let's lift some of the restrictions, and so it's sort of like, there is a little bit of a sort of a political economy that reacts, so it's an optimistic view, but, and certainly it would mean changing the minds of the people, and see if that can follow. But
yeah. I'd also say that I think a kind of agorist approach in a way is more important than the day of reckoning, as much as I would love to see that. But history has shown us over and over that there's probably going to be a guy or two that the finger gets pointed at and they take the fall, and then the real criminals disappear into the shadows. But in the long run, I think the true solution is kind of, as we've been saying, restoring people's sense of agency, restoring an understanding that the solutions have to come up from the ground up and not from the top down. Because, we can get rid of the criminals, but if people don't take responsibility in their own communities for their own decisions, then nothing will change. Another criminal will come in at the top and start doing the same thing all over again in a different category.
Yeah, that's true. One tyrant will replace the next one. Have any of your friends or family gotten mad at you for wanting to do this? I mean, yeah, it's an anonymous group, but it's also, your family knows you and stuff. Are they a little bit worried about you covering such a topic, or does that not, is everybody aligned?
Yeah, I have a good anecdote about that. I have a long history of taking on controversial subjects and storytelling, and my family's aware of that. And I have a family with broad views from the right to the left, and some of the left leaning ones who really, some family members of the baby boom generation who were locked up in their house wearing masks in the house the entire time, absolutely terrified. And to leave the house was to, it was a self-imprisonment. And I did explain to my family member that I'm making this film, and they said to me like, oh gosh, could you do it in about 5 years? I can't handle it right now. Because what I thought was interesting was basically she was saying she's, I think, subliminally aware that it was probably not the right thing to do, that my family member doesn't want to admit that she was wrong. And we're asking people to admit that they were wrong. And if we're and not only that, but no one wants to be made to feel the fool. And if people have given up a year of their life and self-imprisoned themselves, and the data shows that perhaps it may eventually show that was not needed, then it's going to be a difficult thing. And my this is a female family member of mine, and she was just saying to me that she's like, I really hope I'm open to it in 5 years. Not right now. She couldn't handle that idea. I think that it was a good example of how difficult it is to have people admit that they're wrong or can even consider that they might be wrong. And then all the knock-on effects of having to realize everything they've done to themselves that might have been for nothing. This sort of claim of out of an abundance of caution, we've given up so much, and we're talking about 0.02% risk here. And I think that's going to be a tall order of getting people to admit that. And I've been seeing that in my own family.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit challenging. I don't think anybody likes to eat crow. And also everybody's so sensitive about it. And that's, something one of you guys said earlier. It's like they used our empathy and our compassion toward our fellow man against us. And anytime I would try and kind of push back, then they would say, oh, well, wouldn't you feel awful if you killed somebody? I'm like, this is not what we're talking about. Like, there's such a difficulty with coming together because there's such a difference in reality. And I don't know if people are going to want to even give it up.
You're detecting the projection too, right? Because there's going to be a huge sense of anger at themselves. So they're going to project that first onto you for daring to question it. And then you're very, it's very profound, picking up on the Cuomo thing you mentioned earlier, where it's like, where he may have, it looks like he very well made some colossal errors that led to the deaths of many people. And so suddenly all we hear in the narrative is like, oh, he might, I think as you put it, he hit on some women inappropriately. And suddenly, it's protect the message, give people anything they need to project their anger at themselves onto others in a way that doesn't affect the narrative of the policies that caused that led to lockdown. And we're gonna feel a lot more. The projection is really the hurdle, getting past people's ability to project their anger and their hate and the shame and the shunning that is so prevalent. And it's gonna take years. It's gonna take years to unpack that. But I hope we can do it.
Well, I'm excited for you guys. I'm very excited to see the series. When do you think it'll be ready? In a year, you said? About that?
So we're doing this in 2 phases. We're going to have a short version, which will focus largely on lockdowns and mask mandates, and really be focused on the science and some personal stories. And that will be released in the fall. We wanted to get something out before the potential rise of cases and the potential reigniting of these policies.
Effectively, the pilot. We want to get the sort of proof of concept pilot done quickly, right, and then utilize that as a further fundraising tool. But we also feel it should be timely to have it out by the fall, and then the entire series we hope to have done within a year.
Yeah, I think since the larger project is going to be, we're going to go into vaccines and the origin story. Those are kind of unfolding still. So I think it will take into next year before we really have a better grasp of what's going on there. So that's kind of why. Whereas the lockdowns and mask mandates, we have enough data. We've seen what's been done, so we can put something out in the fall for that.
That sounds great. I can't wait. Considering the subject matter is pretty depressing, but I think it's important to be getting the word out there, and it's also important for people to actually support you guys, because people are like, oh, you do it for exposure, you're an artist, you just love it. And it's like, no, this takes away from my family's food if I don't get paid for things. So I wish you a lot of luck with the fundraising, and I look forward to sharing the link, donating myself, and also, sharing the film with my audience. Is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up the show? Maybe any kind of, maybe a call to action besides, maybe people don't have money right now. Like, what else can they do to support you guys?
We do have on our SoundMindCreativeGroup.com website, there is a portal on there where people can send in stories either of themselves or people they know, or other stories they've heard of, in particular personal stories of people that have suffered due to the unintended consequences of the lockdowns in particular. So that's one way to contribute. And then, of course, at various donation levels, people can contribute, I think it's 500 or more people are going to be invited to a sort of an exclusive group where they can actually help provide feedback as we develop the film and create the film, see early segments and kind of actually help shape the film as well, just to sort of be able to be a sounding board. I was just going to mention real quick too, even though it's depressing subject matter, we do intend to inject some humor in parts as we can to keep some lightness about it. And we're exploring ways we're going to do that.
Well, it's absurd enough as it is. I mean, it's hilarious if it wasn't so depressing.
Right.
I mean, there's so much stupidity to go around. The comedy writes itself. It's just like a tragic comedy.
Indeed.
But,
Yes.
Gotta laugh on the way.
Yeah, it's all right on the edge in its own way.
Great. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. One more time, everybody can go to Fundraiser. That's FUNDRAZR.com /follow the science. And you can just Google it one more time. The website and all the links will be in the show notes below. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. I wish you luck. Hey, actually, quick question. What's going to be after this? Is there a new topic that you're going to cover, or is this all you're focusing for now?
We're pretty sure there will be more topics. We don't yet know what those will be, but we certainly feel like what we've created here in order to make this project is something that's going to have legs well into the future.
Excellent. I think so. Well, I mean, hopefully there won't be new topics of this infringement on our rights, but yes, there always is. There always is a good inspiration all around us. So thanks, guys, for creating this, and people get involved. We need the arts to spread the message of freedom. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Tatiana Show. What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. Hey there, it's time for the show, The Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to The Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show.